was kind of abrupt. Kind of gave me whiplash. I wasn't ready for that. Wow. Can I get an amen this morning? That's pretty good. I like that. Everybody's week is going good. If it's not going good, you got a good week coming. Sometimes we got to get our bad ones out of the way. Because you know when you're in a valley, you know there's a mountaintop on both sides, so there's nowhere to go but up. But always remember, when you're on the mountaintop, there's a valley on both sides, so prepare yourself. Sometimes it's a little better to know that you've got to come down and to do it slowly instead of trying to hang on to that mountaintop and have to do the tuck and roll all the way to the bottom. That's the way I do it. I don't want to let go of the mountaintop, so I have to get jerked loose and roll all the way to the bottom. Hey, friendly reminder, would everybody, if you can, take just a second and mute your cell phones? You know, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I heard, I think it was a church song, start ringing on somebody's phone because I heard the word hallelujah come out. Problem was what I heard after it is that it said, it's raining men. True story. Somebody's phone went off and it was like, hallelujah, it's raining men.
That was mine. That was mine.
That wasn't your phone. I was sitting here wondering whose it was. I had it narrowed down to about 3 girls that was sitting close to me. But then there was about 3 guys sitting there too, and I don't know whose it was. A little too much information, isn't it? Remember, check your bulletins for your weekly events and scheduled events that are going on. The bulletins are in the back at the information center. Men's breakfast yesterday. What a great turnout. Way to go, men. There was probably 55 men or more showed up and hung out, fellowshiped a little bit, had testimony come forth. In fact, it gave me an opportunity to kind of share that it had been laid on Christy and I's heart that we are considering opening our house up for some further leadership and foundation training for the church. Well, you know, there could be, according to the word, a great harvest coming as things are getting wrapped up. How many of you know what I'm talking about? How many of you all think we could handle about a double or a triple increase in here? Well, the fact is, if we don't have people coming up and being trained and getting strengthened and getting their marriages stronger and their relationships stronger, it's liable to put so much pressure on people. If we had an increase in here, we might get all wobbly.
I got enough trouble.
See? He's got enough trouble dealing with you, so if we got an increase, what's he supposed to do? There's only so much a man can do. So this would be an opportunity for personal ministry and training and learning how to do things. This isn't for just your average person. This is for people that want to grow and mature and get stronger and learn how to make mistakes, and it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. And so anyway, we have a sign-up sheet in the back. We'd like to know how much there is in interest. This would happen on a Sunday evening at 6:30, and it would be in our home. Be on a very intimate level in the house for training and teaching. Oh boy.
Did it now.
Jeremy and I have been talking about this for a long time. A lot of people need a good foundation. And I've told you over and over, I don't have trouble teaching people, but I have a real battle unteaching people and getting the garbage out of their heads that's been put in through the years. Once I get them untaught, then I can teach them. But if you don't have a foundation to build on, anything you build is not going to last. So what we've decided is we're going to call this the foundation and leadership. Now we'll be dealing with things that I normally won't deal with from the pulpit. Things like, how do you handle church discipline? How do you handle confrontation? Sometimes you just have to have a confrontation. How do you handle that? We'll be dealing with different things. Jeremy and I will be working together. Some things I will handle. Most of it he's going to be handling. But foundation and leadership, think about it. Might be something you want to try out.
Man, he's so good at that. We ought to let him make announcements. That's what I think. He's got a way of saying stuff. So anyway, there is a sign-up sheet in the back. We do need to know what kind of interest there is in doing this. And, you know, because it's not the kind of thing where you just want to pop in and you're not popping in. And, you know, we want to know who wants to be involved in this and stick it out. So sign up. Let us know if you're interested. It's in the back, in the information center. Judy, do you want to say something about your teen class real quick? Come on over.
Duh. Judy, say something?
You want to use your mic?
My Mack is loud. My mic is loud. Yes. Teen class. We have it at 6 o'clock on Sunday evening over in the fellowship hall. Adults or parents of teens, send your kids to class. Send them. We start at 6. We end at 7:30. And Dell and I and the other team leaders are trying to fill these kids full of the Word. As a matter of fact, we're talking about the principles of our faith right now. Giving these kids a foundation so when they move out and they come in here, they're ready to serve. If you don't fill them full of God, the world will fill them full of Word. And then what happens? Dell and I had 30 years, over 30 years of teen pastoring. And here's what happens. You will take your kids to football, soccer, basketball, and those are great. But when it comes to the things of God, you won't. And then when your kid gets in trouble, you're at the altar going, God, what do I do? And what you should have done was bring them here. I don't care if they're tired, you bring them. And you make them come to teen class because they'll get the Word, and when it matters, it'll rise up.
Wonderful. This is Donna Haynes. She's going to share something real quick.
Wednesday nights, our fellowship meeting in the fellowship hall at 6:30. And theme this week is the sound of heaven. We're having spaghetti red and regular spaghetti. We need salads or dessert broth. And if you want to bring a garlic bread, I have some. We may run a little bit short, so garlic bread, salad, or dessert. It's going to be great. Be there.
Okay. Donna, is that here at the church or is that in the fellowship hall? Okay. That's Wednesday, 6 o'clock, spaghetti red. Sounds like a good time. Donnie, come on up, buddy. This is Donnie Bennett. He's been doing some things about prayer around the charging up prayer around the flagpole for our nation. Here he is.
Awesome. Have you ever looked around and just been discouraged in what's going on? You know, Russia's bombing in Syria, China warships are moving into the area, mass shootings almost every day at university, the 10 Commandments being taken out of the capital at Oklahoma City. Have you ever wondered, how can I make a difference? It's called focused prayer. Together, if we get together and focus our prayer as Christians, we're waging war up there. And then it's going to come down, and we're going to take the fight to the enemy. We were doing a prayer around the flagpole in Neosho on Highway 71 and 60, the big flagpole. We're doing it the third Saturday of every month. So if you are tired of feeling hopeless and you want to make a difference, join us at 10 o'clock, the third Saturday of every month. Invite everybody you know. Go invite the quarterback at the high school football team. Have them bring the whole team down. Yeah. Go invite the Cub Scouts. Bring the whole Cub Scouts down. Invite anybody. Invite everybody. Now you can make a difference. Thanks.
You know, it is wonderful to have our children in a nursery, isn't it? Anybody ever had to go to church and you had to bring your kids in here with you? That can be kind of challenging, can't it? You know, they're working really hard over in the nursery trying to teach our kids about the Lord and on their level. However, they could use a little extra help. If anybody knows who Shay is, I don't think she's in here, but we could really use some extra volunteers to kind of just run a cycle in the nursery, kind of help out a little bit, give some of them a relief. I know there was one lady that was over there for like 2 months solid because there wasn't someone to kind of help fill in her class. So if Lord lays that on your heart, and even if he doesn't, you should really be praying about being of some service. And
don't pray about this, do it.
just do it. What's there to pray about? Hey, we need to keep our children's church open, but we can't expect just a few people to be trying to handle the whole thing. We need to give them a break so they can come in here and be in the service a little bit and get fed and get strengthened. If they get weak, then there may not be nobody over there. Then we're going to have kids in here. Then you're going to have the pastor talking about this. We don't want that. So please consider working with the children a little bit. It's a good ministry. They're young, their hearts are open, and they love people. If you are needing to be baptized, looking to be baptized, that is today. Today's your lucky day. Baptism is going to be open. It's right across the parking lot in the fellowship hall. So they will be ready for you after service if you are looking to be baptized. This is going to be the day for it.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Judy and I were yapping here about how important the children's church is, because it goes in stages. From the children's church, they're getting the Bible stories, they're getting the word put into them on their level. Then they progress into the teen group, where their foundation is built upon even further before they come in here ready to serve. There's not one that's less important than the other.
That's right.
So,
oh boy. Okay, here we go. So I tried to get you guys off the hook. All right.
I don't know whether you realize how important children's church is. We have a 3-year program that they go through the entire Bible in 3 years. I mean, they will know all of the Bible stories beginning to end. They're learning the books of the Bible, where they are, how to find things in the Bible. If you have your kids in children's church for 3 years, they've gone through the entire Bible. If you put them in there when they're 4, 5, and 6, and then 7, 8, and 9, they've gone through the Bible 2 times in 6 years. By then, they're ready to move into the teens, and that's part of the foundation that we were talking about earlier. Now, I know we're taking a lot of time today, but we really do. It would do you good, do your kids good, if you'd spend a little time, volunteer to do some work in children's church. How many were here for muster and we had the kids in here? How many would be thankful that they're not in here every Sunday? Okay, do your part.
That was good. There we go. He's good at this. I knew people that's worked in nursery before, and they learned by doing object lessons and studying the material delivered to the kids. And even to this day, years and years later, it was helpful to them because they learned something out of it. So you can get a lot out of working with children. All right, one more thing. If you're here for the first time today, can we see who you are? We just want you to wave at me. If you're here for the first time, you come in. Good to see you this morning. Welcome to the sheep shed. Anybody else? Just slip your hand up. I just want to see who you are. We just want to say thank you and welcome. Yes, sir. I see you back there. We're going to give you some information. You can get a free CD any service you want. And we'd just like to know you were here. If you want to slip that in the offering with your name on it, we would just wanted to have you on record. Let's make them feel welcome, church.
Good morning. Who came to worship the Lord this morning? Oh, stand to your feet. All right, I want you to look at me. Look at your hands. How many of you all have been saved? Raise your hand. I am setting you up, I will tell you that. All right, if you've been saved, these hands are holy. Right? Not because of us, but because of Jesus. So we're going to loosen up. And if you know, I have a lot of energy, so I expect you to like jump around like me. Ready? Okay? Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Let all God's people praise the Lord. Now shake it up, because the devil doesn't want you to worship. Shake off those heavy hands. Lift up
you hear me speak, they're gonna bring life and not defeat. 'Cause I'm convinced and every believe and every see. Okay, wait a minute. That was the lousiest life I've ever heard. Okay, ready? You gotta practice this. 1, 2, 3. We're gonna yell life, okay? 1, 2, 3. Oh no! I know you guys know how to yell. I've been to football games. 1, 2, 3, 5. Yeah! That's
Let's show them where it's at.
And the words you hear me speak will bring life and not defeat. Because we speak out of our mouth are the power of life and death. So I'm going to confess what God has to say. Ready? I'm confessing. But I'm confessing and believing and receiving what Jesus said. Oh, by His grace, I'm able to face what's ahead. Ready? And the words you hear me speak, they're gonna bring life, not defeat. 'Cause I'm confessing and believing and receiving what Jesus said. Sing it out one more time. Well, I'm confessing and believing and receiving what Jesus said. Oh, by His grace, I'm able to face what's ahead. Get ready. And the words you hear me speak, they're gonna bring life, not defeat. 'Cause I'm confessing and believing and receiving what Jesus said. Let's just praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Let all God's people praise the Lord. Get ready? Take off those heavy hands. Lift up your holy hands. Let all God's people praise the Lord.
Just remember, the heading says, if it were not for the United States military, there would be no United States of America. Keep that in mind as I read this to you. Listen. The soldier stood and faced God, which must always come to pass. He hoped his shoes were shining just as brightly as his brass. Step forward now, soldier. How shall I deal with you? Have you always turned the other cheek? To my church, have you been true? The soldier squared his shoulders and said, no, Lord, I guess I ain't. Because those of us who carry guns can't always be a saint. I've had to work most Sundays, and at times my talk was tough. And sometimes I've been violent because the world is awfully rough. But I never took a penny that wasn't mine to keep. Though I worked a lot of overtime when the bills just got too steep. And I never passed a cry for help, though at times I shook with fear. And sometimes, God forgive me, I've wept unmanly tears. I know I don't deserve a place among the people here. They never wanted me around except to calm their fears. If you've a place for me here, Lord, it needn't be so grand. I never expected or had too much, but if you don't, I'll understand. There was silence all around the throne where saints had often trod, as the soldier waited quietly for the judgment of his God. Step forward now, you soldier. You've borne your burdens well. Walk peacefully on heaven's streets, for you've done your time in hell. You see a soldier, thank the soldier. Something funny, we went to eat lunch last Sunday after church, and there was 2 soldiers sitting in the booth, and my father went to go, he was going to pick up their ticket. He couldn't. Somebody already did it. Was that you, buddy? Somebody had already picked up their ticket. All right, hey, join us. This one kind of goes out to our military, because I've seen them sing it. Ready? These are the days of Elijah, declaring the word of the Lord. And these are the days of the servant Moses, righteousness being restored. And these are the days of revival, of family and God is restored. And we are the voice in the desert, crying, preparing the way of the Lord. Behold, he comes, he's riding on the clouds, shining like the sun, at the trumpet call, let it go. Who are the hero to me? Out of Zion's hill, salvation comes. And these are the days of Ezekiel, when violence becoming as flesh. And these are the days of your servant David, rebuilding the temple of praise. And these are the days of the harvest. Oh, the days of fighting the word. And we are the laborers in your vineyard, declaring the word of the Lord. Behold, he comes, he's riding on the clouds, shining like the sun, at the trumpet call, let go. Who are the hero Jubilee? From out of Zion's hill, salvation. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, he's shining like the sun, at the trumpet call, let go. Who are the hero Jubilee? From out of Zion's hill, salvation comes. There's no God like Jehovah. 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 Behold, he comes, he's riding on the clouds, shining like the sun, at the trumpet call, let go. Who are the hero Jubilee? Out of Zion's hill, salvation comes. Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun, at the trumpet call, let go. Who are the hero Jubilee? Out of Zion's hill, salvation. You're all I ever needed. Help me know you are here. One more time, I'll let you down right there. One more time. You're all I want. Come on, please do it. You're all I ever need. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're all I want. Help me know. Help me know you are
in the sky, and no more tears to dim the eye. Or there'll be peace forevermore on that happy golden shore. What a day, a glorious day that will be. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see. When I look upon His face, the one who saved me by His grace, and when He takes me by the hand and He leads me through that promised land. What a day, a glorious day that will be.
Be no sorrow there.
There'll be no sorrow there,
No more burdens.
no more burdens to bear,
Sickness, no pain.
no more sickness and no more pain,
No more party.
no more party over there.
Forever.
And forever I shall be
With the Lord.
with the one who died for me. What a day, and a glorious day that will be.
Wait. Everyone stand, please. Everyone stand. There's two groups of people here today. There's a group that came in needing some encouragement, needing somebody to just say, hey, it's going to be all right. We're going to make it. And there's another group that came in saying, I'm going to find me somebody I can encourage today. I don't know which group you happen to be in personally, I want everybody to go find somebody, just give them a big hug and say, it's going to be all right. This is weird. Come on, find somebody.
It's going to be all right.
Thank you. Whoa! I know you don't believe in getting angry. I believe in it. If you don't believe in it, don't you do it. I try not to let the sun go down on my wrath, but if it does, I stay awake nights, and I don't like that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the world, Gog and Magog. I'm going to be a little teachy this morning. If I was a professor in class, I'd expect you to listen. I don't want you to complain if I take a little bit longer than usual, because you'll go to a football game, and sit there for 3 hours in rain and cold and everything else. So you can sit here for 3 hours and listen to me. I probably won't take that much. You go to a doctor's office and sit for 2 hours for some guy to come in and spend 5 minutes talking to you. We're going to talk about Ezekiel 38 and 39. 2015 has been a year of apocalyptic expectations. I mean, we've got blood moons, global financial collapse, the growing threat of ISIS and Islam. In this confusing world of conflict and contradiction, no one seems to know what to do. Jesus in Matthew 24 made this statement: in the last days, there will be perplexity of nations, and men's hearts failing them for fear. This is perplexing times.
Yeah.
And nobody seems to know what to do. I don't know what our leaders are thinking. But you add to all of that confusion and conflict and contradiction and perplexity. And now then you've got this, add to that the buildup of Russian military in the Middle East with jets, combat helicopters, 15,000 troops, and they've just issued a nationwide recruit order for 150,000 new recruits for the Russian military. They're expecting something. 3-star general marches into the embassy in Baghdad, Russian general marches into the U.S. embassy in Baghdad, and informs them that in 1 hour, Russia is going to begin airstrikes in Syria, and for the U.S. to keep their airplanes out of Syrian airspace, to get their airplanes out of Syria. I mean, if you'd been watching an old Western, he walked in there and said, just get out of town by sundown. If I'd have been the general in charge of the embassy there, I'd have pulled my pistol and said, you've got 30 seconds to get out that door. I'm going to shoot you right square in the head. Now we've got the United States and Russia both holding airstrikes in the same airspace. The potential for an accidental encounter. What's going to happen if we shoot down one of their aircraft or they shoot down one of ours? Could it lead to an escalation of the buildup and possible all-out war?
Oh, yeah.
Things are fragile in the world. the scenario is being set for the stage and the actors of the stage for Ezekiel 38 and 39, Gog and Magog. When there is a confrontation, a confederation of nations, including Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, that's going to form a confederation of 10 nations that's going to come down and attack Israel. They're called the armies of the north, the kings of the north. Iran and Afghanistan have now asked Russia to intervene in their countries like they're intervening in Syria, because they know the United States is going to do nothing. In Psalm 83, I'm not going to go there, but in Psalm 83, it lists the names. Now, Psalm 83 is a psalm of prophecy, and it lists the names of the nations that will form this confederation, and it tells their plan. Their plan is to wipe Israel off. That's in Psalm 83. You can read it when you get a chance. Their plan is in verse 4, that they will wipe Israel off of the map. They will cease to exist. Have you ever heard anything like that recently? Yes. Iran constantly says, we will wipe Israel off of the map. We'll drive them into the sea. They will cease to exist. Yeah. And their goal is to possess all of the land of Israel. They named, some of the names is Iran, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Egypt, Palestinians, Hamas, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and this army from the north, this confederation, is going to be led by Russia. Now, I've preached that for years. A lot of times people couldn't see when it talks about the armies of the north. Let me give you one more isolated statement before we get to Ezekiel 38. It's related, but it's Isaiah 17. By the way, Natalie, thank you. Did you know she drove 18 hours to be here so she could run the projector for us today? That's what she said all about. Thank you. Isaiah 17 talks about the end of times, and in the end of times it says that Damascus, which is the capital of Syria, that Damascus will become a ruined heap, never to be inhabited again. Now, many people believe that are much smarter than I in the realm of prophecy, but they believe that that is referring to a nuclear attack on Damascus. Because, as I understand it, a nuclear attack, when there is a nuclear spill, a nuclear explosion, whatever, that land is laid waste. It's got a half-life of 5,000 years. Now, I could be wrong. Thought I was wrong once, but I was mistaken. In the midst of all of this mess that's going on in the Middle East, I want to try to put this turmoil that's going on in the Middle East into some kind of scriptural, prophetic perspective. Ezekiel 38 and 39 deals with the destruction, the mass destruction of the armies of the north that come against Israel. Now, I'm going to lay out something. There, Ezekiel saw a sequence of events that would begin with the rebirth of Israel, which is already passed. May 14, 1948, Israel became a nation again, a land of their own after being scattered for 2,000 years. Everybody said there would never be. May 1948, they again became a nation. I'll talk about that in a minute. But beginning with the rebirth of Israel, he saw a sequence of events that would go clear up through the Battle of Armageddon at the end of the 7-year tribulation and the beginning of the millennium. So that sequence of events is what I'm going to be talking to you about. So, you see, if you don't know where you've been and you don't know where you are, you can't know where you're going. Hitting a target that you don't have is sort of like coming back from a place you've never been. You've got to know, if you're going to understand prophecy, there's some basic things you have to understand. Now, I will be a little tedious with you today. What confuses people in Ezekiel 38 to 39 is that there are actually 2 battles that he talks about. There's the battle that is described as the battle of the armies from the north, this confederation of nations that come down to wipe Israel off of the map. That's one battle. The other battle is at the end of chapter 39 is the battle of Armageddon, and it takes place after the 7-year tribulation, and it is that battle ends with the beginning of the millennium. So now, I don't want to be too confusing here. But these 2 battles, all right, to understand prophecy. Are you okay? Yes. To understand prophecy, you have to understand that God would reveal to prophets events. These events would be considered mountaintops. He'd show them this event, he'd show them this event, he'd show them this event. What he didn't show them, what the prophets didn't see, is what is called in prophecy the gap. The gap between this mountaintop and this mountaintop. They would see this series, this event, and then there would be a valley, a gap, a time gap. And then there would be this event. And the time gap is what confuses people, because they're not one continuous chain of events. So Israel 38, in Ezekiel 38, Israel is back in their own land, dwelling in a very tenuous situation. And I don't see how things could be any more tense or any more fragile than they are right now for Israel. Israel is surrounded by enemies. By the way, that's what he talks about. They will be surrounded by enemies. And Iran right now, with the threat of nuclear weapons, Russia is now moved into next door to Israel, moved into Syria. Just created and escalated the tension. I want to take just a little bit of time and give you a quick overview of Ezekiel 38, and then we'll go back and try to put it into some kind of perspective. Is that okay? Yes. Doesn't matter, so I'm going to do anyway. Verse 2, Ezekiel 38, talks about, he said, I want you as a prophet to set your face against them and let them know I'm against you. And he names who he's against here. Who's going to be leading this army that comes against Israel? Against Gog, the land of Magog. And I'll tell you who they are in just a little bit. The chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him. And tell them, I'm against you, O God. Gog, not God. G-O-G, Gog. And here's what I'm going to do. Here's what God says he's going to do. You tell him, I will turn you back and put hooks in your jaws, and I will bring you forth. He said, I'm going to direct this like I had a fish on a line. I'm going to put a hook in your jaw, and I'll lead you here, and I'll lead you there. I'm going to bring you here, and I'm going to take you back. You and all your armies. And in verse 5, he lists some of the nations that's going to be involved. Persia is first. By the way, in 1935, Persia changed its name to Iran. So here's Iran, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, and verse 6, Gomer, and all of his bands, Togorma, of the north quarters, all of his bands. Now, notice the north quarters. Where do they come from? From the north parts. 3 different times he says they will come from the north quarters of the north parts. That north is always in relation to Israel. They're coming against Israel out of the north. Verse 8. Now, verse 8 changes the picture. Because now he's talking about to Israel. And he says, after many days in the latter years, he's talking to Israel. He said, you will come back to the land. I'm going to bring you back to the land. Everybody said, that never happened. It was a shock to the world when Israel became a nation after 2,000 years of being scattered. He said, I'm going to bring you back to the land. I'll gather you out of many people. And you'll be brought forth out of the nations of the world. And you will dwell in your own land. He's talking about Israel there. Then he says, verse 9, this armies from the north are going to come down on you like a storm, like a cloud that covers the land. And they're going to think an evil thought. Verse 10. Said they'll think an evil thought. In fact, he tells later, he said, I will put a thought in their mind. They're going to think an evil thought that it's time now. Israel can no longer defend itself. They're like a city of unwalled villages. They're without walls. They have no bars, no gates. Israel is defenseless. Let's go down now and eliminate all of Israel. That's the thought they have in their mind. And then in verse 15, they will come out of the north parts, and they'll bring all of their armies. Verse 16, they will come against my people of Israel like a cloud over the land. It's going to be in the latter days or in the last days. And he said, now God says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring them down against my land. I will bring them down. I will bring them down. And he said, the reason I'm going to bring them down is so that I can show the heathen who's in control. I'll show the heathen who is right and who is wrong. And they will see what's going to happen to God. Verse 18, it'll come to pass the same time that God shall come against the land of Israel, that my fury will come upon my face, and in my jealousy the fire of my wrath, and the whole land of Israel will have a great shaking. Now, if you go to chapter 39, verse 2, because we're still talking about the same battle, are you okay?
Yes.
I don't want to bore you. If you get bored, just tell me and we'll quit.
No.
Prophesy against God and say, I'm against you. I will turn you back, and when I get through with this destruction, you're going to come down to destroy my people Israel. He said, but when I get through, there's only going to be a 1/6 part. 5/6 of you are going to be destroyed. I'll only salvage 1/6 of you. And you come down from the north parts. He says it again in verse 9. They that dwell in Israel, they're going to burn what's left over from the war. They're going to burn the materials, and it'll take them 7 years to burn it. That's in verse 9. Verse 12 says it takes them 7 months for Israel to bury all of the dead and cleanse the land. And people traveling through the desert, if they see a bone, they're supposed to put up a flag so that the buriers can come and find the bone and get it all buried. It takes them 7 years to cleanse the land, to bury it, get them all buried. Now, I went through that pretty quick. Anyway, from 16 ends the battle of the kings of the north. Beginning at verse 17 is the beginning of the battle of Armageddon. And that's where the gap is. There's a 7-year gap between. But anyway, let's stop there. I gave you a quick overview, and I don't want you to get too tired of hearing me here. I don't want to get too tedious. Basically, God is going to bring the armies of the north to destroy Israel, but the armies of the north are the ones that gets destroyed. God said, I'm going to bring them down. He said, I'll put an evil thought in their mind. I'll put hooks in their jaws. Putin and Obama, they think they hot stuff. They're not running anything. God is going to run this show. He's going to put hooks in their jaws. He's going to bring them forth. They think they're making all the decisions. I'll tell you what, they both ought to get on their knees and start praying they get wives. Now in verse 9 it said, the extent of the destruction, the abandoned war material will provide fuel for 7 years. It's interesting because 7 years is the length of the tribulation. 7 years of tribulation. Verse 12 said it takes 7 months to bury the dead. Now I'm going to turn off, thus saith the Lord, for a minute. This is Mack talk. I believe, I've always told you, I'll tell you what I believe. I hated professors that would teach something, give you a whole bunch of information, and then not tell you what they believe. I'll tell you what I believe. I believe this battle, led by Russia, with this confederation of Muslim nations, Arab nations, will mark the rapture of the church and the beginning of the 7-year tribulation. I believe that. I think I can prove it to my own satisfaction, but I'm not saying that that's put in stone anywhere. There are 2 battles, the battle of the armies of the north and the battle of Armageddon. There's a 7-year gap between the 2. This mountaintop, that mountaintop, with a 7-year gap between the 2. Okay. The second battle in Ezekiel 39, verse 16, or verse 17 through 22, is the battle of Armageddon, and all you have to do is compare the description of Armageddon in Revelations 19, 11 through 22 with the description of the battle in chapter 39. I'm not going to go there. We're interested in Gog and Magog. So that means there is a 7-year gap between verse 16 and verse 17 in Ezekiel 39. Okay. I don't know what it does to you, but it builds my faith when I can read and I can understand that God told us, He predicted 2,500 years ago what was going to be happening, and what we're seeing on every news channel, every newspaper in the nation. Amen. Is the headlines or what God told us 100 years ago what was going to be happening. We're living in that day when we see that. Amen. That builds my faith. God's still in charge of this thing. Anyway, yeah, give him a hand. That's okay. Now God tells us, God's Word tells us, who Gog and Magog is. Tells us where they're from, who their allies are, what's going to happen, and when it's going to happen. So he tells us in chapter 38 that Gog is the land of Magog, and he says, I'm against them. Anyway, now who is this Gog and Magog? Where did they come from? Gog is the ruler. The God calls him Gog. And Magog is the land that he rules. If you look at Genesis chapter 10, I'm just going to turn there right quick. First 2 verses. These are the generations of the sons of Noah: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And after the flood, they had many unto them were born, unto these 3 were born sons after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Medea, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. Then he talks about the sons of Gomer. Now, let's go back to Ezekiel 38. Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog were the grandsons of Noah. They were the sons of Japheth. And they settled, his descendants, this Magog, settled in the land around the Black Sea, north of Israel, the land that is now called Russia. That was Magog. Now, the location is always in relation to Israel. I don't want to bog down here, but in verse 6, verse 15, and chapter 39, verse 2 says they will come from the north parts. So Gog and Magog were the sons of Japheth, who was the son of Noah, and they settled to the north parts around the Black Sea. You got that? Now, in verse 38, chapter 38, verse 5 and 6, he tells us who the area. He tells us the area that these armies are going to come from. He tells us they'll come from Persia, that's Iran, Ethiopia, Libya. Verse 6, Gomer. Gomer was also a grandson of Noah. But Gomer and his descendants settled to the area that is now called, they went to the area of Libya, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, the Arab Muslim nations today. Now, these prophesied nations will come against Israel led by the leader of God, who was from the Black Sea, from Russia. All right, now stay with me. We're seeing that happening today. Russia is now moving into Syria and Africa. Now listen, Iran, Russia already has an alliance with Iran. They're now taking control of Syria, and Iraq and Afghanistan have now asked Russia to intervene in their countries because the United States is doing nothing. And now then the terrorist groups are taking over. ISIS is coming and moving back in and taking over their country. So they've asked Russia. So here you're beginning. Hello.
Yes. Yes.
This means yes.
Yes.
This means no. This means I don't have a clue what you're talking about. A little nod every once in a while would be okay. Okay, just so you understand. God told us 2,500 years ago the nations that would make up this Northern Confederation. Today we're seeing that prophecy fulfilled. Every day, on every news channel there is. God's program is right on schedule. When the fullness of the times of the Gentiles is fulfilled, Jesus will come again. All right, now, I've got all of that tedious stuff done. I want to put this thing in position now. I want to positionize Ezekiel 38 and 39 with this series of events that Ezekiel saw that would lead up all the way from the Israel back in the land to the millennium. Okay. in relation to this this sequence of events that will let us know where we are now, where we have been, where we are now, and where we're going. Okay. Everybody get away. This is important now. We're coming down to the close here. Take me another hour to close. Ezekiel 37 is the famous vision of the valley of dry bones. Bones that are dry, never come to life again. God says, you prophesy over. Everybody knows this is referring to nation of Israel that was dried up, they were dispersed, they were dead, they could never live again. And now then, they're going to come back to life and become an army strong and have their own land. That's what that is. Jesus referred to it in Matthew 24, I believe it was Matthew 24, as the budding of the fig tree. Now this is interesting to me. He talks about the budding of the fig tree, which is the nation of Israel back in their own land. And he makes this statement. He says the generation that sees this budding of the fig tree, they see Israel back in the land. He said, that generation shall not pass away until they see me coming in glory. Now, brother, realize that I'm part of that generation. I was 6 years old when Israel became a nation. I'm part of the generation. Now, my generation is passing away pretty quick. But I believe before the last one of my generation is gone that saw that event, Jesus is coming back. I believe that. If not, Jesus is going to have to explain to me why not. Anyway, that's mountaintop number 1. That's in Ezekiel 37. Now skip over to Ezekiel 40. Because Ezekiel 40, he's talking about the millennium, the Sabbath of rest, when Jesus sets up his kingdom on the earth. So between these two mountain peaks, you have 2 other peaks. One of them is in verse 38 and chapter 38 and 39, you have the attack on Israel and the defeat of the armies of the north. And this attack of the armies of the north comes after Israel is back in the land. Right? Verse 30, chapter 37, they're back in the land. Then at some point after that, the gap in between, after that, there's going to be the enemy, the armies of the north are going to come down and attack Israel. Now, the rapture takes place 7 years before Jesus comes to set up his kingdom. So there's another gap there. And chapter 39, verse 9, it says, Israel will burn the weapons that are left for 7 years. And I still believe, I'm going to restate this. I believe the battle with the armies of the north is going to mark the rapture of the church. And simultaneously, as they attack the rapture of the church, and that will mark the beginning of the 7 years of tribulation. But I've told you, that's just what I believe. So I want you to get this order of events in your brain here. Number 1, now if I was teaching you in a class, university, I would tell you, this is going to be on your final exam. And if you don't pass it, you can't go to heaven. So you better listen. Number 1, here's this sequence of events. Now you know I'm joshing you. I'm just trying to get you loosened up so I can really slap you back down in a minute. Number 1, Israel's back in the land. Already happened. Past tense. Okay. Russia must be brought forth and turned back. Has that happened yet? Well, maybe not, but Russia tried to move into Afghanistan and spent, what, 20 years trying to get control, get a foothold in the Middle East. And finally, were forced out of Afghanistan with the help of the United States.
That's correct.
And all of these tunnels and things that are in the mountains of Afghanistan that the terrorists are hiding into and our military was trying to root them out of, we built them. We equipped them.
That's correct.
Now they used it against us later. We're not real bright. So, number one, Israel is back in the land. Number two, Russia will be brought forth and turned back. Okay, I think that's already happened because they finally left Afghanistan, as the old saying, with a tail between their legs. They were whipped. They could not get a foothold there. So, that's number two, past tense. Number three, the armies of the north will be defeated, and I believe church will be raptured. That's number three. Number four, after the church is gone, Antichrist will be revealed. He'll set up his image in the temple, declare himself to be God. Israel will realize in the middle of the tribulation, he'll bring peace at first. He'll realize then that he is not the Messiah, and then the Antichrist will turn on Israel and try to wipe the Jews off of the map. Now that takes place in the middle of the tribulation, and I'm getting sidetracked here. That's called the day of Jacob's trouble. This is the time Jesus spoke about in Matthew 24, verse 22, when he says, except those days be shortened,
Correct.
with no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days would be shortened.
Yes.
Now the elect is not the church. You are not God's elect.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
The church is the bride of Christ.
Yeah.
Yes.
Israel is God's elect. And it says over and over and over that Israel, God was married to Israel.
That's correct.
They are God's elect. They always have been and will always be.
Amen. That's correct.
Church is not going to be here at that time.
That's correct.
Church is going to be gone. We're going to be at the marriage supper of the Lamb when God turns again to his elect. Hello, I've lost it. I totally lost control. Number 5, then comes the battle of Armageddon, which will bring an end to the tribulation and usher in the millennium. All right, now let's get these 5 together. I'm going to go over them real fast. Number 1, Israel's back in the land. Number 2, Russia must be brought forth and turned back. Number 3, the armies of the north will attack Israel. They'll be defeated. The rapture of the church. Number 4, after the church is gone, Antichrist will be revealed. Number 5, then will come the battle of Armageddon, which will end the tribulation and usher in the millennium. Now, let's stop. Let's clear our heads just a minute. I know I've been real tedious with you. Is it possible, church, that the stage is being set in the Middle East for the battle of Gog and Magog, the armies of the north? When God puts hooks in their jaws and they think they're running the show, right now Russia is trying to get control of the Middle East.
Yeah.
They have intentions of building their own military base on the Mediterranean so they will have a warm seaport. They want to control the oil of the Middle East. They want to be the dominant factor. Do you realize if they control the oil from the Middle East, they can control the rest of the nations of the world because they control the oil that goes into Europe now. It just looks like things are falling in place. Is it possible that the stage is being set for the rapture of the church and opening the door for the Antichrist to make his appearance on the stage of history. I think people who have a basic understanding of prophecy at all know on a gut level that we're coming down to the wire, folks. Now listen. Nobody knows, I don't know, nobody knows when all this is going to happen. Because prophetic timing is one thing that God has put in his own power. But I do know this, God is merciful. And he's not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. Amen. God's giving everybody a chance. Even after Noah and his family were in the ark, it says, and yet 7 days, and then God shut the door. Yeah. Noah did not shut the door. God gave everybody 7 days of grace. Yes. And then God shut the door. Once God shuts the door, church, it's over. All opportunity is gone. Now, I don't know when the armies of the north are going to move on Israel, but I do know this. When that happens, the clock is going to begin to tick off the last days of this age. And I really don't want to be here when that happens. I don't want you to be here. I don't want your family to be here, because it's not going to be pretty. And when that happens, those of you who are not going into rapture, you're not sure you're saved. Those of you that are backslidden, you're iffy. You're in and out, up and down, hot and cold. Nobody ever knows where you are. This would be a good time to get your house set in order. And I'll tell you why. Because when these things begin to happen, things are going to begin to move at warp speed. Yeah. And there won't be a lot of time to try to do anything except survive. That's right. Correct. And if you miss the rapture, survival is not even an issue. That's correct. You know enough to know what you need to do. Just be sure. Because if you're not ready when that time comes, it'll be too late. I realize I've covered a lot of material. It's not my purpose now to frighten anybody. It's my purpose is to tell you to look up. Yes. Because your redemption draweth nigh. Get ready. Get ready. Yeah, give me my hand. Get ready. Whatever we're going to do for God, let's get busy about our Father's business. This is no time for game playing. If we're going to play games, I'm through. My game playing days finished a long time ago. Let's get busy about our Father's business. I'm going to quit. If you're not saved, it'd be a good time to set your house in order.